Because you have a certain pride about your family. Like, I was proud of being Mexican. You know, I was proud of my dad's family.
But as a little girl, Marlena Velasquez says something seemed off.
They'd be like, "You're not Mexican." I'd be like, "Yes, I am." And then one would be like, "That must be your stepdad's last name." I'm like, "No, it's my last name." It's almost like you had to prove your ethnicity.
That proof, she thought, would come in an at-home DNA kit. At 40 years old, after a childhood of nagging doubt, Velasquez took an ancestry test.
My DNA.
And I remember I was really impatient. I just wanted to prove everybody that, no, I am Mexican. He is my dad.
In a matter of weeks, the results came in on her phone.
I think I was at work. I was like, "Oh my God, I gotta look at this." And I looked at it, I was like, oh my God.
With a European mother and a Mexican father, Velasquez was shocked to see she had no Mexican DNA in her.
It was heartbreaking because it almost made me feel like I'm not who I thought I was.
And the surprise didn't stop there. Scrolling through the list of relatives on Ancestry, she saw a last name that rang an eerie bell.
And I was like, because he's on my birth certificate.
It was her mother's OBGYN. Velasquez and her sister knew the name well because their parents were open about their fertility issues. They needed assistance. But Velasquez never questioned the man who raised her was her biological father.
So is your understanding that you are still your father's daughter?
Yes.
They used his sperm?
Yes.
What was going through your mind at that point?
Crazy. I honestly thought it was a criminal thing because I was thinking, I was like, no. I said, it was supposed to be my dad's sperm. And because I wanted to know everything, I started messaging people.
She reached out to people identified as close relatives through the Ancestry app. She found a half-brother in Washington who says his mother was also a patient of the same doctor at Vesper Memorial Hospital, the same hospital in San Leandro where she was born 40 years ago. Then there's her sister, the one she grew up with, both believing their dad was their dad. A DNA test confirmed they are full siblings, meaning not only did the fertility doctor use his own sperm on a patient at least 3 times, he did it at least twice with the same family.
What the F? She kept freaking texting me saying your results are, and I'm like, dude, just be quiet. I haven't looked at them yet. Don't say anything. And I opened it and I looked at it and I just kind of like started crying.
Velasquez's sister says she is too disturbed by this case to reveal her identity. There was a time their mother recommended the doctor be her OBGYN.
He practiced, I think, up until like 6 years ago. He was in San Leandro. I remember when I got pregnant with my daughter, who's 22, my mom was like, he's a wonderful doctor.
With questions that needed answers and both their parents deceased, Velasquez decided to reach out to the doctor.
I found the phone number and I left a message. And I wasn't rude on it. I just basically said, I have questions. Did my parents know that you're biologically my father? And I was blocked.
It was shortly after that point Velasquez contacted our investigative unit. We verified the doctor's name on her birth certificate, found the San Leandro hospital where she was born no longer exists, and we made contact with the now retired physician, the man who turned out to be both sisters' biological father. We asked if he would speak with Velasquez, and he agreed.
How do you hope this conversation goes in a few minutes?
Just some clarity on, like, was this truly my mom's biggest lie of her life?
Or did she lie? Did she even know?
That's the thing, is I don't think she knew.
Right.
The doctor denied our request to record his part of the phone call.
I apologize for bothering you. I couldn't let it go. Like, I had to find out for sure.
Over the phone, the doctor said her parents arranged for an anonymous donor. Back in the 70s and early 80s, they didn't normally freeze sperm, so they needed a live donor. But the day of her mother's procedure, the donor didn't show up. So he stepped in as a favor and used his own sperm. He said he did not tell her parents or anyone else. When we asked if he ever did this again, he said he believes it was only once, but it was so long ago. When we later told him we found 2 other cases, the half-sibling in Washington and Velasquez's sister, the doctor told us, "My apologies. It seems that the sands of time have erased items that I am not proud of. However, math and science are impossible to argue with." When we asked how many times he did this, he said only ones where donors did not show. How many times did donors fail to show? That's when the doctor ended our communication.
How are you feeling? Like, it didn't really give me anything, like, because either he really can't remember or he just doesn't want to get himself in trouble.
I'm angry. I want it to be known what he's done. I'm sure there could be so many more people out there.
The Velasquez sisters want to publicize the doctor's name, but he hasn't been charged with a crime or named in a lawsuit. In our next report, we investigate the larger concerns with that and hear from some who believe these disturbing discoveries aren't just a problem of the past.
Well, more people are getting the surprise of their lives. Through DNA tests, they're learning their biological fathers are their mother's fertility doctors. And in many cases, the mothers are just as shocked.
Investigative reporter Candace Wynn digs deeper into a local case and the industry as a whole. Here's part 2 of her investigation.
I couldn't wrap my mind out of it was nothing to him. He was just able to do this.
In the months we've been following Marlena Velasquez's case, she has been grappling with her discovery that her mother's San Leandro fertility doctor used his own sperm to artificially reproduce her, that it was done without her parents' knowledge, according to the doctor, and he did it at least 2 other times, including to conceive her sister, who wants to remain anonymous for this story.
She told me, I think I hung up. I just went in my room and cried. I don't understand why you did this and why can't you talk to us? We don't want anything from him.
This feeling of shock stretches far beyond the Velasquez sisters. Through lawsuits and news reports, the investigative unit has tracked down numerous cases nationwide.
I was 35 and I take a DNA test.
There's also a Netflix documentary called My Father, where an Indiana OBGYN fathered at least 94 offspring with unknowing patients.
I will fight to expose all of your secrets.
When you start digging into it and you start to realize just how much is going on and how many victims there are.
After learning she was a doctor-donor conceived child, Tracy Portugal started looking for others and found 38 doctors and more than 300 cases nationwide of physicians accused of using their own sperm with their patients, mostly during the 70s and 80s. These numbers are expected to grow as more people take DNA tests.
For many of us, it's very isolating in that the doctor and their family want nothing to do with us.
But should we judge decisions made in this industry decades ago by our standards today? Our search for that answer brought us to Dr. Alan DeCherney in Washington, D.C. He's been practicing since the 70s and is considered a leader in the fertility field.
The culture then was just to help the patient.
Was it wrong, a doctor using his own sperm on a patient without her consent? Was that unethical?
One time, I know it kind of dates me or whatever, but I'm kind of sympathetic with one time. The donor doesn't show up. It's 1960, and he doesn't want to disappoint the patient.
For the cases where it happened multiple times, like with Velasquez's family OBGYN?
And that's wrong. I mean, I think anybody would be appalled by that.
What are some steps to move forward, you think?
I think that the best thing is truth, and I think it hurts for a little while, but it's better to get it out there.
So is the truth getting out there? We spoke with an attorney who is not associated with Portugal's or the Velasquez cases, but says he's been getting so many calls about this issue, his law firm now has a fertility fraud practice.
We've represented roughly 27 women against their doctors for that.
What ultimately happened in those cases? Did the truth come out?
Basically, all of our cases where we've represented women against their doctors, the doctors ultimately have admitted that they did it. In almost all of them, too, they settle with us before we need to file a lawsuit. That is accompanied by a confidentiality agreement.
But why would the plaintiffs sign that confidentiality agreement if they want the story to come out, if they want other siblings to know about their case and potentially come forward?
Lots of people actually don't want their story to come out. I mean, unfortunately, lots of people feel shame about this.
Shame and the sense there's little recourse for people taking DNA tests now, only to discover these disturbing parts of their past. When we contacted the California Attorney General's office about these cases, they said the Medical Board of California is their client in this matter. The medical board told us they can only take action against a doctor within 7 years of the alleged act. There is a federal lawmaker working on legislation that could retroactively criminalize using reproductive material falsely, but it hasn't been formally introduced yet.
Up to this point, I feel all of them have let me and other victims down.
For the Velasquez sisters, there has been a silver lining. They say in a strange way, this journey has brought them closer to who they will always consider to be their real father, regardless of DNA.
Because we know blood in the end doesn't matter anything. It's the love.
This man who raised them, who has since passed away and will never know of their discovery.
Nothing changes. He's our dad. It made me want him more and love him more and appreciate for what he did for us as children.
What do you want out of all this?
I just want people to know who their biological father is. I think they have a right to know.
The fertility field has come a long way since the 70s and 80s when most of these cases happened. It has since boomed into a $3 billion industry that remains largely self-regulated.
An effort to criminalize fertility fraud at the federal level. A congresswoman has introduced a bill to prosecute doctors who decades ago used their own sperm to artificially inseminate their patients without their consent.
I think it's good. These doctors need to be held accountable for what they did.
More than 6 months after searching for answers with the investigative unit, Marlena Velasquez is reacting to a bill introduced in Congress this month to criminalize what her mother's fertility doctor did to her family.
Okay, if you've ever done one of those at-home DNA tests, imagine...
In our earlier reports, we told you Velasquez took an ancestry DNA test and found out her biological father is actually her mother's OBGYN.
And I looked at it, I was like, oh my God.
We tracked down the now retired San Leandro doctor. He told us over the phone he used his own sperm in her mother's procedure when the sperm donor didn't show up. He said he didn't tell her parents, and now, more than 40 years later, he regrets it. We found he did this at least 2 other times, including to conceive Velasquez's sister.
I think that's absurd. If the physician truly wanted to help his patient, he would have granted consent to that patient before he moved forward. And because he did not, I think that he should be prosecuted.
Representative Stephanie Bice from Oklahoma says her bill was inspired by cases like Velasquez's and many others highlighted in the Netflix documentary Our Father.
I was 35 and I take a DNA test.
Maybe the more egregious part was that there was no recourse.
That lack of recourse has more than frustrated Velasquez.
I honestly wish I didn't know. I wish I can go back and not do the DNA test. And I regret ever finding out because all it did was make me mad.
Currently, there are only 11 states that actually have some sort of statute on the books.
California has Penal Code 367G, which makes it a crime for anyone to implant sperm, ova, or embryos through assisted reproduction without consent of the recipient. The problem is the statute of limitations is 3 years from the act. The vast majority of fertility fraud victims, especially the children, don't find out until decades later through DNA testing.
If passed, what would your bill do?
One of the most important pieces of it is allows for the statute of limitations to begin once the victim realizes that they have been a victim of fertility fraud.
Bice's bill would also codify fertility fraud as a federal sexual abuse crime with a maximum imprisonment of 10 years. And it would allow judges to order restitution for victims. If the bill is signed into law, it wouldn't be retroactive for criminal prosecution, so it wouldn't directly impact Velasquez. But maybe it will help someone in the future, she says.
If anything comes of what I did, I hope a law like this comes into effect. It'll make what I did somewhat worth it.